The College of Veterinary Medicine at Kansas State University has named its Alumni Fellow for 2014, and his is a familiar name not only to Kansas State but to the veterinary medicine field here in the state of Kansas. It's our pleasure to recognize Jim Coffman for this award. Jim, thank you for being with us and congratulations on this recognition.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Your roots are so deep not only in Kansas but at Kansas State, so take us back to the beginning. You are a native Kansan. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Linden, which is the first county seat south of Topeka. And my first connection with K-State was when I listened to them play in the Final Four in the 40s. And I can picture right now being sick, laying on the couch in the living room, listening to that game listening to them play Kentucky on the radio. And I kind of got hooked as a K-State fan. And by the time I was 10, I was sure I wanted to be a veterinarian, like my Uncle Roger. And that never changed. I wanted to be a veterinarian all the way through, and so I got more and more involved in watching K-State and came up here to 4-H Roundup, for example. You know, as things play out, I started as a pre-veterinary medicine student here in 1956 and graduated in 62. Got my DVM in 62 and went from there. I wanted to be
into private business?
I wanted to be a practitioner, private practitioner. Then I knew I wanted to be in horse practice. So I took over a dorm at horse practice in Wichita and was there until 65. Came back here for 4 years on the faculty. Went to Oklahoma City and started a practice. And sold that a couple years later and went to the University of Missouri for 10 years as an academic clinician and researcher in the equine medicine. And you know, I went back and forth between practice and academic practice, private practice and academic practice. I still miss practice. You know, the one career decision that I go back to every now and then was when I left Wichita. But you can only do one thing at a time, and in the end, academics won out.
So you came back to Kansas State from your stint at Missouri, or then into private practice, then to Kansas State. What was your first post as you returned for good?
When I came back for good, I came back as the head of what was then surgery and medicine. And Dr. Jake Mosier had been in that position for years. I idolized Jake, still do. He was one of my chief mentors. And so I came back into that job in '81 and from the University of Missouri. And then Dean Trotter retired, and I wound up being appointed dean in veterinary medicine in '84. And then Dwayne Ocker retired as president, and John Weefald was appointed, and a year after that, well, I went over to be interim provost for 6 months, and I repeated that 34 times. So I left that job in '04.
And hence you've been retired, but still active, of course.
Yeah, I worked part-time for about 4 years after I left the provost office here, and then did some gratis work in animal science after I completely retired to work with them on their still incubating idea of equine assisted therapy program. But I've been completely retired since '09, and I love it.
Jim, as you look back to your accomplishments at Kansas State at the College of Veterinary Medicine prior to taking over the administrative role as dean, what do you consider the high points of that stretch of your career?
You know, when I was here the first time and left in 1969, I was fortunate and blessed to receive the Norden Award for teaching. That was a really high point. You know, the first purpose of a university is teaching. and then everything else is added on to that. And I really like teaching, and I love equine clinical medicine in an academic setting. And I finally figured out that the reason I wound up in academic clinical medicine was you can take a case much farther than you can in practice in most instances. You can come to understand all the nuts and bolts about a given case, where at some point in practice you begin to reach constraints. And so that was a high point every time we had an interesting case, which was almost every day. And then I got more and more involved in research and had the terrific opportunity to work with people who were first and foremost prominent research people, where I would provide the clinical factor in investigating a particular problem, and other people who were almost full-time in research would carry the ball in making it a full-blown research project. And I had a lot of affiliation with colleagues here and at Missouri in that kind of a combined effort. And that was a tremendous experience.
Mm-hmm. Any particular research achievement during that experience that stands out to you?
The research achievement that brought me back here from practice the first time had to do with a disease called equine infectious anemia, which is horses are a lifetime carrier of a virus that can cause a really devastating illness, and it was thought to not exist in Kansas. I ran into it in a large way in private practice, and I came back here partly to pursue the interest in that disease. And then the other major disease process that I was involved in research through my whole academic career until I got into administration is in laminitis, or founder. Harold Garner, who was in practice in Eureka, was also an alumni fellow, by the way. He and I collaborated for 10 years on that problem at Missouri. And that was, I think about that. I still think about some of the underlying mechanisms that to this day have not been completely elucidated with regard to laminitis. So that became a lifetime interest, really.
And there are so many other examples we could share here, but let's move on to your academic stint as the Dean of the College of Veterinary Medicine. When you shift roles and put on that hat, is it quite a change?
It's a huge change. And in essence, you really can't go back. People might think, well, I'm going to try administration, and if I don't like it or it doesn't work out, I'll go back. You really need to be committed to administration for good reasons and stay with it, because it's hard to go back after 5 or 6 years. And I really liked it. I think the thing that first and foremost got me into administration, first as head of surgery and medicine, and then as dean, was when you have a body of experience of your own over, let's say, a 15 or 20 year period, and you feel like you're beginning to get a handle on some things, how to write, how to present, how to teach, and all those things. You like to begin to extend that experience through supporting other people. And so, to some extent, administration becomes a synergism between you and your past experience and other faculty, particularly young faculty in the college. And that's less the case as a university-wide administrator, but as a department head and dean, you can do a lot of that. And I always thought that was a strong part of that. And there came a time when Nebraska became convinced they wanted to have a college of veterinary medicine. And that was happening just as I was appointed dean. And we worked with them for about 2 years and finally worked an arrangement where they had their students here for the better part of 20 years. And Dean Lorenz and ultimately Dean Richardson worked with that program, and now Iowa State does. I enjoyed that a lot. You know, I think that's a matter of getting the best that both institutions can bring to the table on a joint program like that. It's just one time, you have those kind of opportunities come along all the time. And they're all challenging, they're all interesting, and I think they give you opportunities to leverage the strengths of the college. The newest one is Dean Richardson's work long, hard, and effectively with the university to get first the Biosecurity Research Institute here, and as a result of all that and the growth in biosecurity research at K-State, now MBAF. Well, that's another bigger example of the same, much bigger example of the same kind of thing. And you really like to see those positive things happen.
Is it hard to keep a balance between innovation and vision and still maintain those services and functions that are traditional and inherent in a college of veterinary medicine?
That's the central never-ending challenge. Yeah, it is. I'll tell you what my approach is to thinking about direction setting in an institution like a college or a university as it pertains to trying to keep that balance. And that is to come to understand what the emerging imperatives are. And I'll give you an example or two in a minute, but come to understand all the ins and outs of emerging imperatives that will impact over the next, let's say, 10 to 20 years your institution. And then work with the faculty, the students, the university, the legislature to get the college in the best position or the university in the best position in that environment. Here's an example. Up to, from the immediate post-World War II period, up to 1979, the per capita spending in the United States increased. Since 1979, the per capita spending in the United States decreased to the present day. Well, when you get out to about 1985, you don't have to be very smart to realize this is not going to stop anytime soon when you take into account the pressures of K through 12 funding, social rehabilitation service funding, and so forth. That's what I mean by an emerging imperative. You've got to start thinking in terms of the reality that this is not going to stop. Technology is another example. The emergence of technology as it applies to teaching, information systems, research, so forth. And cultural changes. The need to get far more minorities and women engaged in higher education. Now, in veterinary medicine, I think we see an emerging imperative that has to do with declining state resources, rapidly increasing costs of operation, and the impact that has on tuition. That's a clear imperative that's going to occupy leadership and faculty for the next 20 years. Well, I think, you know, the job of being an administrator, in my mind, really has two parts. The balance you're talking about, and the balance of trying to stay abreast of what the emerging imperatives are and how those affect forthcoming strategy and planning.
Full-time job.
Full-time job, yeah. But fun, most of the time.
Jim, as a final point here, you've obviously stayed engaged in the field even since your retirement. As you look at, very broadly now, the veterinary medicine field, what do you perceive as the greatest challenge before it for the next 5 years, 10 years?
I think it's a two-part challenge. One is the one I just briefly touched on, of declining state support in public institutions. They're becoming state-assisted institutions or progressively privatized institutions. coupled with rising costs, and how do you strategize around that? I think that's, and then balancing the need for research, outreach, diagnostic services, and teaching, as you would apply that to a veterinary college. And but we have to remember that teaching is the first purpose of a university, and everything else is added on to that. But when you look at the pressure today of doing all these other things, like we have to get NBAF here. Well, that wasn't veterinary medicine alone saying that. The university, the livestock industry, the Fed, the legislature, the governor, the city of Manhattan all want those things to happen. And they don't happen without a cost, but there's no more money there. And so when you look at the pressure that puts on an institution, whether it's a college or the whole university, for resources and attention and just thought, keeping the student foremost is the biggest single challenge we have. It'd be so easy for the importance of teaching and learning to slowly dissipate in that environment. I think K-State and the College of Veterinary Medicine can be real proud of themselves, and that's not happening. But it's an ever-present danger, so to speak. And I think that's the balance that you were referring to earlier. It's huge and central and ongoing, and one of the most important things people have to be about.
One final thing, and that is your thoughts on being recognized as the Alumni Fellow, a three-time graduate of the College of Veterinary Medicine. What does this recognition mean to you?
A lot. You know, I'm proud to be a veterinarian. I'm proud to be a graduate of this college and of Kansas State University. And I have so much appreciation for what the college and university have done for me, but also family and friends. You know, my wife Sharon has been huge support, as has our whole family, and I've learned a lot from a large number of friends and mentors over time as well. And you know, that all becomes one package deal. And what you learn is you get all excited about doing things and about exploring things like I'm going to talk about tomorrow, and all the factors related to tuition, escalation of tuition costs. But at the end of the day, you're mostly grateful to have had the opportunity to do all these things.
College of Veterinary Medicine and Kansas State proper are grateful for your service over those many years and your infinite contributions to this university.
It's, I think it's run more my way than theirs. But
Always a pleasure, Jim. Thank you, and again, congratulations.
Thank you, Eric. It's great to see you again.
Likewise. He is the Alumni Fellow for the College of Veterinary Medicine, 2014, Dr. Jim Coffman.